What happens when a CEO steps into the heat of his own bakery only to find his team being denied water during a summer heat wave? Franklin Zeller kept his arms crossed, staring at the sales reports from Store 4. It was the only one of the 9 bakery locations that had steadily dropped in both staff retention and customer satisfaction over the past 8 months. He'd bought the chain 5 years ago from the original family owners and turned it around through hard work and grit. But lately, something about this store had gone sour. He had already sat through 2 months of sugar-coated updates from the district manager. Busy location, high turnover, they said. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Franklin didn't buy it. The numbers told a different story. Late deliveries, customer complaints. And last week, a handwritten letter from a former cashier simply said, "It's not the work, it's how we're treated." That was enough. Franklin booked a flight and shaved his beard. He tossed his tailored clothes for worn jeans, a faded cap, and beat-up sneakers. At 53, with salt and pepper hair and a new set of glasses, he looked more like someone applying for a second chance than a CEO. Since he'd never personally visited that location, and none of the staff had been at the company longer than a year, no one would recognize him. He applied through a local temp agency and got assigned a 1-week trial as a bakery trainee. "Name?" the shift supervisor asked, barely glancing up from her clipboard when he arrived. "Frank," he said. "Just Frank." The bakery was already sweltering at 7 a.m. The ovens buzzed, the air was thick with flour, and the back of house was loud with timers, mixers, and workers shouting over each other. Only 8 crew members were on the floor during breakfast rush, 3 under what was needed. "How come you're short today?" Franklin asked a young woman, folding boxes beside him. She looked side to side and then leaned in. "Because no one wants to stay here, and every time someone quits, they don't replace them. They just expect us to step up." Her name tag read, Harper. "You like it here otherwise?" he asked. She hesitated. "I love baking, but it's hard to love it here." He was about to ask what she meant when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Harper! Less chatting, more folding." Franklin turned to see a tall woman in her late 30s, arms crossed, lips tight. Her name tag read, Nicole, store manager. "She's training the new guy," Franklin called out, trying to keep it light. Nicole walked over. "We don't need training buddies. You'll learn by doing. Harper, back to packaging. Frank, follow me." She led him to the oven's massive industrial ones that roared with heat. "You'll be working here today. Pull trays when the timer hits 0. Don't mess up the rotation." No explanation, no safety brief. Just heat and pressure. Franklin nodded and got to work. The first hour drained him. By the second, his shirt clung to his back, his arms ached, and his throat burned. At one point, a teenage worker named Luis stumbled into the wall beside the oven. "You okay?" Franklin asked, grabbing his elbow. "I just need water," Luis muttered, dizzy. Nicole's voice rang out again. "No water breaks until the shift ends. You got 20 minutes left, suck it up." Franklin's jaw clenched. "You're seriously not letting him drink water?" he asked, stepping between her and the teen. Nicole rolled her eyes. "If I let one have a break, they all want one. Then we fall behind. We run a tight ship here. That's why I'm in charge." Luis looked like he might be sick. Franklin guided him to a stool near the back door anyway. Ignoring Nicole's glare. "Sit down. I'll get you water," he said. Nicole blocked his path. "You leave that oven, you're done." Franklin stared at her, stunned. "You're threatening to fire me for getting a kid some water?" "We don't tolerate disobedience," she snapped. Franklin didn't answer. He turned and walked to the break room, filled a cup, and brought it back to Luis. The teen took it with shaking hands. "You'll get written up for that," Nicole barked from across the room. Franklin didn't care. He was already sweating inside, but now his blood boiled. When break finally came, Harper slid beside him in the back room. "Thanks for doing that," she said quietly. "Most people just keep their heads down." Franklin nodded, wiping his face with a paper towel. "That kind of thing happen a lot?" She looked away. "Too much, but no one listens." He looked around at the cracked tiles, broken clock, and half-stocked fridge. "Someone's going to listen now," he said under his breath. He was here to learn the truth, but now he'd seen it, felt it, and he wasn't done. Not yet. The second day started before sunrise. Franklin arrived early, hoping to speak with a few of the opening staff before the ovens fired up. The back door was already propped open with a milk crate. Inside, the kitchen lights flickered weakly overhead. He found Harper at the prep table, rolling out dough with slow, tired motions. "You always come in this early?" he asked, tying his apron. She didn't look up. "Only when the night shift doesn't finish prep, which is most days now." He noticed the stack of unshaped croissants beside her, at least 60, maybe more. "You're doing all that alone?" "Was supposed to be 2 of us," Jenna called out. Again. "Anyone covering?" She gave a short laugh. No one left a call. Before he could respond, Nicole entered from the office, already snapping orders. "Frank, ovens again. Harper, keep rolling. I want full trays by 7. She didn't acknowledge either of them beyond that, just vanished into the front, heels clicking on the tile. Franklin stepped into his station and got the timers running. The air was thick already, and the hood vents rattled overhead. He watched the crew trickle in. Louise again, pale and slow-moving, and a new face, a young woman with chipped nails and a nervous expression, who introduced herself as Kayla. "You worked food before?" Franklin asked her as they loaded trays. "No," she said. "Retail, but I needed the hours." He could see she was watching Nicole, trying to mimic the fast pace everyone else had already accepted as normal. By mid-morning, the front line was backed up. Franklin rotated out of the ovens to help box pastries and saw 2 customers leave without being served. He stepped beside a cashier named Amir, quietly taking over packaging to speed things up. "You ever get backup when it gets like this?" Franklin asked, sliding a Danish into a box. Amir didn't look away from the register. "Only if the district manager's coming." He saw it then. The shift was being run with just enough people to survive on paper, but nowhere near enough to function properly. And the way they were spoken to, no encouragement, no thanks, just constant pressure. At noon, Nicole called a quick meeting in the back. Everyone gathered around the prep table, sweaty and silent. "Tomorrow, corporate's sending someone to check inventory. I want everything spotless by close tonight. No excuses. If I see crumbs behind the coolers again, someone's losing hours." Franklin leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You cutting hours as punishment?" Nicole turned slowly. "Excuse me? If someone misses a spot, they get less pay that week? That's how we maintain standards. Incentives matter." Sounds like a threat, not an incentive. She took a step forward. "You've been here 2 days. You don't know how I run this place." Franklin didn't flinch. "I know what I've seen." She dismissed him with a wave. "Everyone back to work." As the group dispersed, Luis lingered behind. Franklin caught his eye. "You all right?" Luis hesitated. "I'm thinking of quitting." "Why?" "I can't keep up, and Nicole told me if I miss another shift even for a doctor, she'll cut me from the schedule." Franklin narrowed his eyes. "You sick?" Luis shrugged. "Asthma, gets worse in the heat. But I can't afford to miss rent." Franklin watched him walk back to the sink, shoulders low. It was a quiet kind of defeat he recognized too well. He'd seen it in factories growing up his father, clocking in, even when he had pneumonia, because missing a shift meant losing work entirely. And now, here it was again, decades later, in a bakery bearing his company's name. That afternoon, Franklin offered to stay late to help Harper with close. She looked surprised, but didn't argue. As the front lights dimmed and the last customers left, they worked side by side scrubbing the floor. Harper was quiet until they reached the walk-in cooler. "She told Jenna to stop wearing her headscarf last month," Harper said suddenly. Franklin paused. "Nicole did?" "Yeah, said it looked unprofessional. Jenna reported it. HR said they'd investigate. 2 weeks later, Jenna's hours were cut in half." He set down the mop handle. "Why didn't anyone follow up?" "Because Jenna couldn't afford to wait. She left after that." Franklin ran a hand down his face. "Has anything like that happened to anyone else?" Harper nodded. "Kayla, she's on her first week. Nicole told her not to wear braids if she wanted to be taken seriously. Said it in the back room. Right in front of Amir." Franklin's jaw clenched. He didn't speak, just walked to the office door. It was locked. "Nicole leave already?" "Always does. 5 minutes before close, like clockwork." He looked at the darkened windows of the office, then back to Harper. "You ever see her actually clean anything?" Harper shook her head. Never. She just tells us what we missed. He left the store quietly that night, every step heavier than the one before. Back at his hotel, he typed out a list. Not general notes specific, time-stamped incidents. He needed names, quotes, actions. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was abuse of authority, discrimination, and systemic neglect. He called his assistant on a secure line. Pull Nicole's file. I want full shift logs for the last 6 months, including complaints and schedule changes. And I want HR's entire record of that store. Every report, every follow-up. His voice was low, controlled. And send someone to visit Luis's family, quietly. Make sure he gets checked out. I want him covered. The next morning, he returned to the bakery before dawn, this time not as Frank the trainee, but as Franklin Zeller, CEO of the entire chain. He wore the same jeans, same cap. But the mask was off, and this time, Nicole wouldn't be the one giving the orders. Franklin stepped through the back entrance just after 5 a.m., the same way he had the past 3 mornings. But this time, he wasn't clocking in as a trainee. He wore the same clothes, faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, and a navy windbreaker, but his posture had changed. He didn't linger near the prep tables or wait for direction. He moved straight to the office door and unlocked it with a master key. Inside, he flipped on the lights. A thin layer of dust lined the corners of the desk. The computer monitor blinked to life, revealing the employee schedule, hours logged, and a long list of internal messages, most of them unread. He scrolled through them in silence. HR follow-ups marked pending. Customer complaints flagged low priority. Multiple entries from staff asking for additional help, training, or time off. None had responses. The office door swung open behind him. Nicole froze in the doorway. "You're not supposed to be in here." Franklin stood slowly, his eyes steady. "You're right, but I own the building." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what kind of joke this is, but I'm Franklin Zeller, founder, CEO, and as of this morning, your employment here is over." She didn't laugh. She didn't argue. "You can't just walk in here and, I've been here for 3 days. I've seen enough to end this conversation right now." She straightened, arms crossed. "That's ridiculous. I've kept this store afloat without any real support. If you're going to punish someone for doing their job, be my guest, but don't expect this store to run without me." Franklin stepped forward. "You've created a culture of fear and burnout. You've ignored safety risks, disrespected staff, and violated company policy more times than I can count. You punished employees for medical issues, discouraged religious expression, and made discriminatory remarks about hairstyles. That's not discipline. That's abuse." Her tone shifted. "Maybe if corporate actually sent help instead of hiding behind emails, I wouldn't have to be the bad guy. You didn't have to be anything. You chose how to lead, and you failed." When she didn't move, he gestured to the door. "You'll be escorted out within the hour. You're not to speak to the staff. Your access is revoked." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her shoulders dropped slightly before she turned and walked out. Franklin stood alone for a moment. Then he opened the door, walked onto the floor, and called the team together. Harper arrived first, still tying her apron. Luis trailed behind, eyes wide with confusion. Amir leaned against the prep table, arms folded. Kayla hovered near the sink, uncertain. Franklin waited until they were all in a loose semicircle. "My name is Franklin Zeller. This company is mine. I've been working here undercover the past 3 days because something about this location didn't sit right." He looked at each of them. "I saw enough to confirm every concern, and more." He paused. "Nicole is no longer employed here." The silence was thick. Harper blinked twice. "She's really gone?" Franklin nodded once. "Effective immediately." Luis let out a slow breath. Amir glanced at Kayla, who stared at the floor. "I'm not here to pretend we can fix everything overnight," Franklin continued. "We're still understaffed. The heat is still rough. The workload hasn't changed. But what will change starting now is how you're treated." He pointed toward the break room. "Today we're bringing in portable cooling units. Tomorrow we're installing a new ventilation system. Until then, water breaks will be scheduled and flexible. If you need to step out because you're overheated or not feeling well, you tell someone. And no one questions it." Luis looked up. Even during rush? Especially during rush. Health comes first. Amir cleared his throat. What about hours? They keep getting cut without warning. That ends today. Schedules will be posted a full week in advance. No last-minute changes without consent. And if you're asked to work overtime, it's voluntary and paid at time and a half. Kayla raised her hand slightly, then lowered it. You can speak up, Franklin said. She hesitated. Is someone new going to replace Nicole? Yes, Franklin said, but not before we talk about what kind of leader this store actually needs. You'll all have input before a replacement is made. Harper stepped forward, voice steady. What happens to the complaints she buried? HR has been instructed to reopen every report filed in the last year. Each one will be reviewed independently. You'll be contacted directly, and you'll have the option to speak with me or someone from my office. The room was quiet again, but the tension had shifted. No longer fear, just uncertainty, and a cautious kind of hope. I'll be here for the next several days, Franklin said. Not in the office, right here, on the floor. He picked up an apron from the hook and tied it on. Let's get to work. The day moved differently. The pace was still intense, but the mood had changed. When Luis stepped outside for air mid-shift, no one stopped him. When Harper asked for help with a delivery tray, Amir jumped in without being prompted. At one point, Franklin caught Kayla humming under her breath while filling the pastry case. By mid-afternoon, an HR rep arrived. She set up at a back table and quietly began calling staff in one by one. No clipboard, no formalities, just listening. Franklin didn't hover. He stayed on the floor, rotating between ovens, prep, and front register. He didn't announce his title again. He just worked. By closing time, the team looked spent but not crushed. Near the back sink, Luis was wiping down trays when Harper leaned over and asked quietly, "You okay?" He nodded. "First shift, I didn't feel like quitting." She gave a half smile. "Same." As they locked up, Franklin gathered the team one last time. "I'm not here to be congratulated," he said. "I missed this. I didn't see what was happening until it got this far. I won't let that happen again." He looked around at the faces tired but alert, watchful. "I failed you by being too far away from the floor, from the people who keep this place alive. That changes now." No one clapped, no one cheered. That wasn't the kind of moment this was. But as they filed out, Harper lingered. "You said we'd have input on who comes next," she said. "You will," Franklin assured her. She nodded once. "Then I'll stay." And with that, she walked into the night air, shoulders straighter than they'd been all week. By the following week, the bakery was operating under temporary leadership. Franklin had assigned a regional training lead, Miriam, to oversee day-to-day operations, while a permanent store manager was selected. She wasn't there to crack a whip, just to observe, support, and ensure no one was left carrying more than they could handle. Franklin stayed in town, checking in daily without announcing his presence formally. He rotated between stations when things got tight, filled in during lunch rushes, and quietly met with staff one-on-one, after hours in a rented office above the cafe across the street. He didn't want staged meetings or filtered feedback. He wanted truth. Amir was the first to sit across from him. "Honestly, I didn't expect anything to actually change," he said, hands resting on his knees. "But the air's different now. People actually talk instead of just powering through." Franklin nodded. "What would help you long-term? We need a second register. That line gets out of control during weekends, and it's not fair to customers or whoever's on cash." Franklin wrote it down. "That's doable." Next came Kayla. She was unsure at first, clutching a small notebook, but not opening it. "I've never worked food before," she said. "Retail was strict, but here, before, I felt like making a mistake meant I'd get humiliated." "You don't have to worry about that anymore," Franklin said. She nodded hesitantly. "I just want to know if it's okay to ask questions now, like, without someone making a scene about it. It's not just okay. It's expected." She finally opened her notebook. "Okay, then I have a few." They went through them, one by one. Equipment, shift pacing, storage labeling. Nothing dramatic, just things that had been ignored. The most difficult conversation came with Luis. He arrived with his mother. Franklin had arranged transportation himself, quietly making sure the boy's health had been seen to by professionals. His medication had been adjusted, and he now had a formal note from his doctor requiring temperature-controlled accommodations. Luis didn't say much at first. "I didn't want to get anyone in trouble," he said, eyes on the floor. "You didn't," Franklin said. "That's not what any of this is about." His mother, seated beside him, spoke gently. "Luis doesn't like attention. He just wants to work. But he was coming home sick, dizzy, not eating." "I should have known sooner," Franklin said. "No one should have to choose between their health and their paycheck." He gave them both a folder with updated policies, a list of accommodations, and a direct HR contact outside the store chain, along with a prepaid card covering Luis's next 2 months of medication. Luis looked up then, his voice quiet. "I want to stay, just like this. When people care." "You've got my word," Franklin said. "That's the only version of this job we're going to offer moving forward." Word spread quietly among the crew, not through announcements, but through things simply being handled. The register was serviced and a second station installed. The cooling units were upgraded. A new employee was added to prep an older woman named Michelle, who'd worked in bakeries for 30 years and trained new hires with so much ease that even Harper cracked a joke mid-shift. Franklin watched from the sidelines as things began to level out. Not perfect, there were still rushes, still delays. But the weight wasn't crushing anymore. People helped each other without looking over their shoulders first. The final step was the selection of the new store manager. Instead of corporate sending someone, Franklin invited 3 candidates to spend a day working side by side with the team. No titles, no introductions, just shifts. At the end of the week, the staff voted privately using sealed ballots. Miriam tallied the results and brought them to Franklin. "Unanimous," she said. "Didn't expect that." He smiled faintly. "Neither did I." That Monday, Harper stood in front of the team in a crisp slate gray shirt with a name tag that now read, "Assistant Manager." "Before anyone says anything," she said, holding up her hands, "I'm not here to boss anyone around. I just want to make sure we all get through the day in one piece, and maybe have time to breathe." There was a short beat of silence. Then Amir nodded once, and Kayla grinned wide. Luis gave a quiet thumbs up from the back. Franklin didn't speak. He just watched, arms crossed by the door, as the team moved into their morning routine. Later that week, Franklin met with the district office. He laid out revised training protocols, mandatory leadership evaluations, and a new whistleblower system that bypassed store management entirely. All reports would go straight to a third-party firm, with anonymous tracking and required follow-up. No more complaints disappearing into inboxes. He also announced a rotating field program that required every corporate manager, including himself, to shadow a frontline store for 1 full week each quarter. No desk, no title, just the job. Some of the executives looked uncomfortable. One asked if that was really necessary. Franklin didn't raise his voice. "I saw a boy lean against a wall because he couldn't breathe and get told to finish his shift. That happened under our name, in our building, on our clock. So, yes, it's necessary." No one asked again. On his last day in town, Franklin stopped by the bakery one final time. The air was cooler now, the ovens fitted with improved ventilation. A fan rotated quietly near the prep table, and a chalkboard by the front counter read, "Try our new honey almond twist, Luis's idea." He ordered a coffee and sat by the window. No one made a big deal of him being there. Harper waved from the back, busy coaching a new hire on filling ratios. Kayla managed the front with steady hands. Amir laughed with a customer over a mislabeled muffin. Franklin didn't stay long. He finished his coffee, dropped a tip in the jar, and stepped out into the morning sun. Outside, he paused just once to glance back. The bakery buzzed with life, not frantic, not strained. Just people working, together, safely, with dignity. He walked away knowing it wouldn't be perfect every day, but it would never again be ignored.